Okay, we are launching block number 7 of our mystery quilt sew along. And so these are the fabrics that you're going to need for our block 7. So first off, we have L3, whoops, L2. All right, let's start again here. We need L2, we need L3, so there it is. We need M4, so there that color is. That's a beautiful red. And then last but not least, we need the very, very dark purple that is D2. So again, L2, L3, M4, and D2. These are the fabrics we're going to need for block number 7. Okay, so what you're going to need to cut from L2 is you're going to need two 5.5-inch squares, one 4.5-inch square, and one 5 3/4-inch square. So here are our two. There's our 4.5. Here are our two 5.5. And then last but not least, our 5 3/4 inch. So there's for L2. And then L3, we need one that is 5 3/4 from L3. So there that one is. That one is a 5 3/4 inch square. From M4, we need two 5.5-inch squares. So there are my two 5.5-inch squares. And then, of course, last but not least, from our beautiful dark purple, which is the D2, we need four 2.5-inch squares, and there they are. And we need two 4 7/8-inch squares. So that is what we're going to start with. Hey everybody, Marsha from Be So Creative, and we are working on block 7 of our mystery sew along. And so just to give you a little bit of here are the blocks that we've already done. And now we are going to get started on block number 7. So let's go over what we need. All right, so the fabrics that we're going to be needing for block number 7 is L2, L3, M4, which is that delicious red, and then D2, which is a very dark purple. And it almost, in certain lights, this is almost going to look black. But anyway, these are the ones we need: L2, L3, M4, and D2. All right, so according to our cutting instructions, we need two 5.5-inch squares, one 4.5-inch square, and one 5 3/4-inch square of L2. So there we have it. There is our two 5.5-inch, our 4.5-inch square, and also our 5 3/4-inch square. And remember, those are of L2. Then we need one 5 3/4-inch square of L3. And so there we have that one. From M4, which again is that really beautiful red, we need two 5.5-inch squares. And there they are. Okay. And then last but not least, we need from D2, we need four 2.5-inch squares and two 4 7/8-inch squares. So here's our 2.5-inch squares of D2 and our two 4 7/8-inch squares of D2. So these are the fabrics that you're going to need, and this is what you're going to need to cut for block number 7. All right, we're going to be making our half square triangles first. So what it says is, using the 5.5-inch squares, we're going to place an L2 square to an M4 square with right sides together, and we're going to have 2 sets of these. Then we're going to draw a diagonal line on each set and sew a scant 1/4 inch seam on the side of the diagonal line. Cut on the diagonal line, press the seams open, and we will have 4 half square triangles that are going to be squared up to 4.5. So let's get started doing that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw that diagonal line down. And you can just see our diagonal line drawn there. Do the same thing on this one. And then, as you guys know, I always like to go ahead and I draw the line that I'm actually going to be sewing on. And the reason I like doing that is because it allows me to just follow the line instead of having to be perfect following that line on my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we're just going to draw that extra line on both sides. All right, so there's my lines. They are drawn. Just lift that up so you can see, you can see my lines are drawn. And now we're going to put those with our beautiful M4. So we're going to just put those right on top. Go just like that. And we're going to pin this in place because I don't want it to shift. And we're going to do the other one this exact same way. And then we're going to actually sew just off of our line there. So let me sew those right now. All right, so we've actually sewn our lines on our half square triangles here. There you can see it a little bit better. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we are going to, I'm going to do it this way so y'all can see. That's a little bit easier to see than the paisley color. And we're just going to line up our ruler with our points. One group. And two. Yeah, got a little waver there, but that's okay. Not a biggie because that's going to be our seam allowance. All right, so we have 4 of these. And our directions tell us to cut on the diagonal line, which we've done. And now we're going to press these seams open. And so we're going to do that real quick. All right, so as you all know, I have to have my easy press pen and my wooden iron to get my seams taken care of. So we're just going to run the easy press pen with the liquid in it along our seam allowance. And I'm just going to do them all since I'm here. And since we're going to press this open, it doesn't matter which side we do. I just do them all at once. Okay. And I'm going to take our block And again, remember, I like to put it on the sandpaper because it's going to hold this in place and it's not going to waver too much or get stretched. And then we're just going to open that seam allowance up and just, if you have a roll and press, that works well for this too. There we go. I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to press and make sure I don't have any kind of a little pleat in my seam allowance. So we're going to do that to all of these. And last but not least, all right, now that we've got those done, now it's time to give them a nice press. And remember, we are pressing, we're not ironing. We just want to set that seam and do all of them. All right, there we have it. Now, there are our blocks. And I want to remind you that after we've pressed the seams open, we're going to square these up to 4.5 inches. All right, so that's the next thing we're going to do. So grab my handy dandy ruler. And again, when I measure this, it's just a hair over 5 inches. So we want to square it up to 4.5. So I'm just going to make sure my diagonal line stays on my seam allowance. And we're going to slide this down until I'm at 4 3/4. Flip it around. Line that diagonal line back up. Here's my 4.5 inch mark. So we're going to make sure that that's lined up down the side and across the bottom, which it is. And there we go. And we're going to trim up all of our half square triangles to 4.5 as according to the instructions. All right, so now we're going to make our center square. And what we're going to do is we're going to use our 4.5 inch L2 square. And we're going to place a 2.5-inch D2 square on the opposite corners with right sides together. And we're going to draw a diagonal line from the corner of the D2 squares, and we're going to sew on the diagonal line. Remember, we want to make sure that when we flip this over that it's actually going to fill in that space. So let's just do it real quick here. So the first thing I'm going to do is all right, we're going to place a D2 square in the corner. And we're going to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of the D2 square. Okay. And we want to make sure that this edge and this edge are right in line with the L2 square. So let's get that pin there. We're going to do the same thing on this corner as well. So here we go. We're going to line him up and make sure that he's totally in line with that bottom one. Okay. And that shifted a little. There we go. All right. Get that pinned in place. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sew on the outside, towards the outside. We're going to sew down our line right here on both sides. All right, so we've stitched on our lines or just off to the edge, which I have done. I've just, the edge of my needle was touching my line. So now what we're going to do is, now we're going to check and make sure that when I flip this triangle part over, I want to make sure that it's going to fill in that whole triangle there on the side, because remember, we're going to be cutting this away. So this side looks good. So let's check out this side. And we're just going to push that over. And yes, both sides are nicely filled in. And so now what we're going to do is we're just going to trim that off. So I'm just going to get my little handy dandy ruler here. Going to trim that triangle off. We're going to do the other side. And now, according to our instructions, it says that we're going to press these seams open. So here we go. It's kind of hard to see on that black, isn't it? Right. It's on our sandpaper. There's that side. Do the same thing on this one. Press that seam open. Sure, I don't have a pucker on this side. And now I'm just going to press this, and we're going to come back and we're going to do the same thing to these corners. All right, so here we go. Now we're going to do the other two corners. So let's draw our diagonal line here. We want to make sure that we've got a nice line along here. Same thing on this side. All right, now we're going to get those sewn. And okay, so now we're going to check this guy. Yep, he's good. Check the other side. Oops. Yep. All right, let's get that trimmed off. Little corner where that comes in doesn't want to lay down as nicely as the center does. So we got to make sure that that's going to stay down where we need it. And now we're just going to go and we're going to press this as well. All right, so there is our little center square. And we want to make sure that the center should be 4.5 inches unfinished, because remember, when it says unfinished, that means before it's sewn into the actual block or quilt that you're doing. So this is unfinished. And so we're going to check that real quick and see what he looks like. And so, well, looky there. I love it when it comes out. This is exactly 4.5 inch square unfinished. So we are looking good with that. And now we're ready to go on to our next section. All right, so now we're going to be making our quarter square and our half square triangles that we're going to be needing to put the rest of the block together. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to subcut the 5 3/4 inch L2 and L3 squares cut twice on the diagonal. So the first thing we're going to do is, and as you all know, I messed up and I actually drew my lines on this one. So hooray. In one direction, we have them where they need to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to line up our ruler point to point. And I need to turn that a little because I don't want to have to move anything. So I want to make sure that all of my points are on my little mat here. So here we go. We're going to line this up, both of my points. And then we're going to take our cutting mat and we're just going to turn it. We're not going to move anything. And we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to line up our points. And now we have 4 square triangles. All right, so we're going to set this one aside. And we're going to do the same thing to our L3. So here we go, point to point with our ruler. Turn our cutting mat. We don't want to pick that up. There we go. We're going to line that up. All right, so now here are our 4 square triangles of L3 and our square triangles of our L2. So we're going to set those aside. Then we're going to get the 4 7/8 inch D2 square, and we're going to cut it once on the diagonal. All right, so here we go. We're only going to cut this once. We're just making half square triangles. All right. All right, so here's one, and we're going to do our second D2 square, and we're also going to cut it on the diagonal once. All right, there we go. We're going to make 4 sets. So that's what we've done. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we've done the same over there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start putting them together. Place an L2 triangle to an L3 triangle with right sides together, making 4 sets. All right, so remember I'm going to set these are our D2, so here are our other ones. So what we're going to do is, this is our L2, this is our L3, and we're going to put these together like so, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch. And so when we open this, this is what this is going to look like. So that is going to be our next assignment. So I'm just going to lay these out just like so. There's one. Here's our second one. Our third one. And last but not least, our fourth one. And now we're going to sew our 1/4 inch seam allowance along these sides. Okay, so we've sewn our triangles. Here they are. Yay. And now we're going to press the seams open. So when we do that, let's grab our handy dandy. All right, remember these are going to be pressed open. And just remember that you're working with the bias along these edges. So please be careful. Don't stretch too much. We're just gonna flip it over. The thing that I do want you to pay close attention to when you are sewing these guys together is that when I laid this out, I had my L2 on the bottom and the L3 on the top. As you can see, that's the darker one. L3 is the darker one. So that is on the top. We sewed that short side. And then when we opened it up, this is what it looked like. We had L2 on one side and L3 on the other. And so when I open this up, it looks exactly like my picture here. And all of them need to do this. All of them need to look this way because of how the pattern of the block is going to go together. So just make sure that you've laid all of them out the exact same way so that when you open them up and they get attached to its next piece, they're going to form the pattern like we need them to, okay? Let's finish these last two up and we're going to get them pressed. Right now, we're going to press these and we're going to go on to our next section. All right, so we've got them all pressed. They look beautiful. And so now we're going to use the D2 half square triangle that we just cut. We're going to fold it in half and we're going to mark the center on the wrong side. We're going to place one of our quarter square triangles to the D2 half square triangle with right sides together, matching the quarter square triangle seam to the marked center of the D2 half square triangle. And we're going to make 4 sets of those. So let's see how we're going to do that. So the first thing that we're going to do, let me slide this over so you can kind of see, because this dark purple is really dark. So what you're going to do is you're just going to put your points together and you're going to give it a nice finger crease. And then what I like to do is I'm going to open that up and I've got my marker here and I'm going to mark the center, and I'm going to do that on all 4 of my half square triangles. And anytime I'm trying to line something up like this is exactly how I do it. I don't get out the measure and all that kind of stuff. Unless you've cut really wonky, this is a great way to find the center of something just by putting those points together. 2 more. So line up those points, line up along the top edge and give it a nice finger crease. And give it a nice mark. 1 more. Right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our quarter square triangles and we are going to line up that seam allowance with our mark there. Okay, so you can see my seam allowance here, and there's my center mark. So we're just going to put those 2 together, and I am going to pin them on both sides so it's not going to shift or walk on me. And then I'm just going to come down here and put a couple of pins, 1 on each near the point, and that's going to hold that where I want it to be. And I do want to make sure that my raw edges are even. And if something is not quite fitting, don't worry, because we are going to be trimming this block up, all right? Because see, when I turn that over, this half square triangle is actually smaller than my quarter square triangles that I've created. So we're just going to do that for all of these. So again, here's my center mark. You can just see it. We're going to line up that seam allowance with the center mark. We're going to pin on both sides. And down the side. All right, I'm going to do the rest and I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are. They're all sewn together. Again, I want to remind you that when you put these together, you are going to have excess of the quarter square triangles hanging over the D3 one. Don't worry about it, because remember when we looked at our pattern and it says sew the half square triangles to the quarter square triangles as shown, you will have 4 units. And what are we going to do? We're going to square them up to 4.5 inches. So this is going to be trimmed up. So no worries there. And we are going to go ahead and we are going to press those seams open. Okay. And let me get my go. Get those seams pressed. And we're going to flip it over. Make sure there are 0 puckers. There we go. And we're going to do all 4 of them that way. All right. Okay, I just want to again remind you all, do not skip finding your center mark on your large D3 triangle, D2 triangle, I'm sorry. The reason being is that, remember, we're going to have to trim these blocks up to 4.5. And if you do not center this guy with this seam allowance here, you may be off and we may not be able to trim off the edges like we needed to. So this is something that you really want to pay close attention to, is finding that center of our D2 square and lining those up. So please take the time to find the center and mark it like the instructions tell us. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to square these up to 4.5. And then we're getting ready to put our block together. All right, so like right now, if I'm just measuring here, this one is down this way, it's 4.5. So what we're going to do is we are going to, I'm just going to line my square up here, and I am going to make sure that along the bottom edge of our D2 square is lined up nicely with my 4.5-inch mark on my ruler. And I'm not going to cut anything off of here except this little tip. But we are going to get rid of this up here. All right. It's out of there. Yeah. Then we're going to spin this around. There we have it. And we're going to line our four and a half, 4.5. We're off just a little bit right here, but because we're nicely lined up here across the top, we're not going to worry about this. So let's go ahead and trim off this side here. Whoops, I slipped a little. Let's put that back. All right. So he's going to be off a little bit up here in the corner, but let's keep trimming. Okay, so he's a little bit over down here at the bottom, but that's okay. He's nicely lined up here on the side. So we're just going to go ahead and he's nicely lined up down our diagonal seams. So let's just go ahead. Flip it around.